every one of us have had these 16th century bullies in our lives, these sweethearts. And if I went back through your history and your life and I started to pluck out the people that gave you hope when you needed it, when you didn't feel like going to practice, when you didn't feel like playing your instrument, when you didn't feel like maybe getting out of bed one day. If I took those people out of your past, you wouldn't be who you are today. They changed the trajectory of your life. We center a lot of what we do around the hopelessness that kids feel today. For me and for our organization, I know that the solution to a kid that's hopeless is you flood their life with sweethearts that give hope to kids that need it the most, and you surround them with heroes.
What up, Masters? Welcome to another episode of Path to Mastery. This week we have a really important episode for you. This is my friend Tom Murphy, and they're out there just doing big things in the world right now. Tom, it's funny, he calls himself a superhero. It's great because I know a lot of us, we want to live and have the job that we just absolutely love doing and we jump out of bed to do every day. And that's what these guys get to do. They have a company called Sweethearts and Heroes. And what they do is go out and talk to kids in schools, going around the country, and they're just sharing an amazing message of hope with Rick, who is the war hero. It's just so awesome what they're doing. And ultimately what they're doing is stopping bullying in schools, which leads to other problems and challenges, obviously. Stopping suicide, children's suicide. What they're doing is so important, and it's just really about making a difference. And, I'm just excited. Like I said, this is an important episode, and these guys are doing really great things out there. So we're going to get you to Tom in a minute. I do want to just acknowledge our sponsors, which is Vulcan 7. Check them out. They've got a phenomenal product. You guys know when I was in the trenches every day, that's what I used. And I believe they're the best of the best with data, CRM built in. You get your leads, your phone numbers, calendar, everything you need to be successful, scripts. You can try them out for $49 for 2 weeks and see what you think. Give them a shot. Just go to vulcan7.com/path to mastery to try it out for a couple weeks. Like I said, vulcan7.com/path to mastery. All right, well, listen, I want to get you to Tom. After listening to this, if you're in the area, these guys are coming here to talk to us live. Oh my gosh, that's where I met Tom at a presentation. They just absolutely crushed it. It's on empathy, leadership, just phenomenal. August 1st, they'll be here in Glastonbury, Connecticut. If you have interest in attending that event, shoot me an email. I'll get you the details. David@davidihill.com. You rock. Enjoy Tom Murphy. Hey, Masters. Welcome to another episode of Path to Mastery podcast. And today we are with the infamous Thomas Murphy. What's up, Tom?
What's up, David Hill? Really a pleasure to be on your show. I'm excited to talk to you. I had a great time meeting you at Adam's event several weeks ago, and I'm super excited to be here.
Yeah, that was super cool to meet you. It's funny, too, because you are a past UFC fighter. You can tell us about that. So you have a big presence to you. And when I met you at the event, I didn't even see you come in. I just kind of saw you. And I went up to you, and I think you introduced yourself to me. And I'm like, what do you do? And you're like, I'm a superhero. And I was like, okay. What's this guy? And I had no idea who you were, man. And it's just super, super cool. So first off, fill in some gaps. Tell our listeners who you are. And then tell us why you call yourself a superhero.
Well, yeah, it's funny. I got interviewed a couple months ago, and the paper actually said self-proclaimed superhero. And my partner, Rick, who we may touch on, actually has been teasing me about it because now I'm becoming a self-proclaimed superhero. But it's the way I've introduced myself, man, for the last several years of my life, because if you know what a hero does, a hero is willing to do things other people aren't willing to do, jump into action and save people. And really that's what I've been doing for the last 10 years of my life, maybe even longer, is helping kids survive in a world that's changing. And it's never been harder to be a kid. It's never been harder to be an educator. Never been harder to be a parent than in today's world. I've been very fortunate to crisscross this country in the last 10 years and talk to well over 1 million kids from Hawaii to Houston to Montreal. We got a pretty good message, man, that is needed more than ever in what's happening in the landscape with our children. So I got kind of a long story, but, in a quick nutshell, I was born and raised in Philadelphia. The first 20 years of my life, my parents ran a mission home, and they took people off the streets of Philadelphia. I tell people at the age of 9, my parents gave their only son's bedroom, their only biological son's bedroom away, and I slept in a bathtub for a year because my parents gave their son's room away to someone that didn't have one, a homeless person. And that's really, for me, when Sweethearts and Heroes started, because I spent my entire first 10 to 15 years of my life watching different people come in and out of our house, people that were truly hopeless. And then I moved to upstate New York. I was about 12 or 13. My parents kept it going, had people brought up from Philadelphia to live with us, people that were trying to change their lives, people that had true challenges. I never used to talk about that, but over the last couple of years, I've really re-explored that part of my life. And, I didn't realize that's when Sweethearts and Heroes began, at the age of 9, sleeping in a bathtub. But then I moved upstate New York, got involved in wrestling, didn't have a lot of money, so you needed a pair of shorts and a T-shirt. And I think I was programmed to wrestle, to put my hands on people, which, a long time after led to a small stint with the Ultimate Fighting Championship, did a reality TV show called The Ultimate Fighter. But really, I made some amazing connections through that, and I didn't realize that was part of this journey as well, because ultimately mixed martial arts became my connection to young people. And I found myself just talking to young people. That was I called it my delicious irony. It was this hook that I put in kids, this mixed martial arts, and then I would run out on the stage and say how much I hate fighting when I was here to talk about bullying. And it didn't make a lot of sense to kids. It's just like I say, it's a delicious irony. It didn't make a whole lot of sense, but I had them hooked. And then we unfolded this message called Sweethearts and Heroes, and we brought it across the country, man, and it truly changes and saves lives.
So you were on I didn't know you were on the show, The Ultimate Fighter. I mean, I'm a diehard. I think I told you that when we met. Which season were you on?
Season 2, right after the first one. It was one Rashad Evans ended up winning.
Okay.
To be honest with you, this sounds crazy, but I never watched the show.
No.
I didn't. I really didn't, man. I never watched it.
Are you guys really together for like 8 weeks or something? Is that how it goes? And they just film all the fights, or does it happen like faster than that?
It was 40 days in Las Vegas, my recollection. It was one of the worst experiences of my life and one of the greatest. I tore my medial collateral ligament a week into the show.
Oh, wow.
And, the guy that did Chuck Liddell's knee, Dr. Sanders or something, said, listen, you tore it, you can keep going, or you can pull yourself out. I just kept my mouth shut and keep going. But yeah, man, it was quite a ride, but it was painful and torturous for me. I think more psychologically, because you couldn't really compete the way you wanted to with a torn MCL.
I know when I met you, you shared a video with us and you showed the video of you fighting. I thought you were actually fighting Frank Mir. I mentioned that. But then you started off by saying, I hate fighting. Tell us about that.
I found myself 10 years ago talking to kids. I've had some wonderful coaches. I won't even get into the business side of my life, but I was a corporate director in the railroad industry for many, many years. And I only mention that because not just on the sports front, collegiately, professionally, but I've had some great coaches in my life, and I really enjoy giving lessons to young people. I found myself about 10 years ago talking to a lot of young people, marrying kind of my business career, my athletic career, into messages of leadership, into messages of goal setting and motivation. And my partner, part of Sweethearts and Heroes, is a guy I wrestled with in college. His name is Jason Spector, and he was the heavyweight. I was the 190-pounder for the State University of New York at Brockport. He asked me, because he had seen me present to kids on leadership and stuff like that, he'd asked me, he said, hey, could you do something at my school on bullying? I was in charge of this assembly. The speaker, it fell through last minute. Could you do something? And I'm like, yeah, I could run around the stage and act crazy for kids. So I started by just looking up the word bully in the dictionary and looking at the history of the word, and I found kind of remarkably that the word meant sweetheart. It was a very endearing term, this thing called a bully in the 16th century. And I realized that it was a common thread that we all shared. And I honestly did the first Sweethearts and Heroes presentation as just a way to give back to one of my sweethearts, one of my 16th century bullies, because I certainly would not have competed professionally at the level I did if it wasn't for Jason, this guy who asked me to come in and give this presentation. And my true goal was just to go to his school, to play some mixed martial arts, to point at their phys ed coach and say, hey, if it wasn't for that guy, I wouldn't have been in that cage. He bullied me the right way. He made me a better person. He made me stronger. He made me faster. He was bigger than me. He was older than me. He bullied me, but he did it to make me better. And that was my plan, to go in, to show mixed martial arts, to impress kids, and then to talk about this big heavyweight that helped me become a professional athlete. We had no idea what we were actually building or uncovering, because what we discovered over time was, I don't think we discovered it, but, every one of us, David, have had these 16th century bullies in our lives, these sweethearts. And if I went back through your history and your life and I started to pluck out the people that gave you hope when you needed it, when you didn't feel like going to practice, when you didn't feel like playing your instrument, when you didn't feel like maybe getting out of bed one day, if I took those people out of your past, you wouldn't be who you are today. They changed the trajectory of your life. All of these things just came together, and mixed martial arts was just kind of my hook for kids in that whole thing before I unloaded that, your 16th century bullies give you the hope and the opportunity that you have through life. I mean, that's one of the things, what it means to be human.
Yeah.
And the mixed martial arts thing's just kind of funny. I'm a kind of a shock artist. And when you play mixed martial arts and you're there to talk about bullying and you run out on stage and say, I hate fighting, it doesn't make sense to the immature brain. It doesn't make sense to many brains, but it also gives me an opportunity to discuss with people a sport that 10 years ago wasn't looked at as a real healthy thing. And I have a tremendous love for the combat sports and wrestling. I tell kids all the time, I say, whoa, because most people look at mixed martial arts and they say it's violent. And I completely disagree, and I've debated this countless times, that violence is implied on someone who does not wish to be part of the exercise. Like, that's violence. I compete in a very aggressive sport. Like, when I go and compete with my friends or I train with my buddies, we punch each other in the face and we kick each other in the head, and there's no violence. Like, I go out to eat with them afterwards and I shake hands and I say, wow, you got me good. Like, there's no violence in that. Violence is perpetrated on an unwilling participant. I compete in a sport I'm extremely proud of called mixed martial arts.
The context that you've talked about bullying so far is actually been kind of in a positive context, right? Like, there's been influential people maybe that pushed you, but there's another side of this as well. And that's the area you guys spend a lot of time focusing on, helping younger kids in schools that are in really tough situations with bullies. So I want to talk about that as well. But with regards to jumping in a ring with somebody and then, trying to take each other's heads off and submit people, how do you kind of, right when that's done, just say, okay, let's go grab a beer now or a coffee or dinner? How do you separate the two? Like, once the bell rings, it's done. How do you shut it off?
Well, here's the difference, man. You don't have the mindset that I have revolving around mixed martial arts, wrestling, competition, putting your hands on other people. My play as a child was to touch things. My play was to wrestle with my father. That was my play. It's what I was really programmed to do. So I don't look at it ever as I'm trying to kill someone. I'm trying to maim someone. I'm looking at it, there's a way to score points, and in wrestling you take people to the ground, sometimes very ferociously, sometimes very aggressively, but I don't look at that as trying to permanently disable people. But I've also accepted the fact that if I get hurt in my play, that's a consequence of the play. It's like talking to a downhill skier and saying, you may fall and break your leg or your neck. You better not do it, because that could be one of the consequences. Now, I do understand there's some muddy water, because people will look at you and say, well, wait a minute, Tom. It's not like potentially you will break your leg or break your neck. That's what you're going in there to do, is to break someone's arm or break someone's leg or knock someone out. That's part of the rule set. But it's very difficult for someone that has never competitively performed a combat sport to understand the mindset that goes along with it. Most people associate anger, frustration, aggression with that physical play because a lot of kids didn't grow up playing the way that I played, very aggressively. If you look at the biology of it, I mean, we are programmed. I mean, rats they will start to rough and tumble play at 4 weeks of age, and they'll do it up to 14 weeks of age. And when they don't rough and tumble play, they won't even know how to mate properly. Most mammals have to touch each other, and it's a whole other section of work that I spend a lot of time talking to people about because I talk to kids about kids and about development. But my play was just very aggressive, man, and I don't ever tell someone that has to be their perspective or their mindset. And it's very hard to articulate because I just never look at it like if somebody hurts me, I don't look at it as they're intentionally trying to hurt me. They're trying to outscore me in a competition, and part of that is getting the person to say uncle. Part of that is potentially knocking someone out.
Yeah.
I don't know if that makes a lot of sense, but it makes perfect sense to me. It doesn't make much sense to 75-year-old women that have never rough and tumble play. I understand that very well because I've had that discussion with many teachers, especially female teachers, that say, that's violent. And I say, well, I disagree, and nothing could be further from the truth.
Well, the good news is the listeners of my podcast, the demographic just doesn't fit 75-year-old women. So we're in pretty good shape, man. Listen, so I was a kickboxer as a kid. I boxed as a young adult. And it's interesting because I shared my childhood early with you, and I come from a really messed up childhood. And I think most of my listeners know that. Maybe 100 episodes ago, I shared kind of my story. Somebody else interviewed me. But I didn't go in to have fun. I went into this was like survival. When the bell rang, it was like kill or be killed. Yeah. As soon as I knew it was over, it was over. There's good people, and I'm sure there's people with not the greatest intentions in any sport, in professional mixed martial arts as well.
I think that bridges everything. I mean, there's people in business that don't have very good intentions. There's people in all walks of life that can use malevolence and hurtfulness and deceit and punishment and torture the wrong way. I mean, those are some big words and some really nasty, evil concepts, but the reality is there are people. I mean, I've listened to dozens of Mike Tyson interviews, and Mike Tyson was an angry young man that went there to hurt people.
Yep.
And I know there's some mixed martial artists that go there to hurt people. Unfortunately, I think that end of it is growing because it's becoming so sensationalized that now you have to portray very much that stigma or you don't become very popular. You know, it's funny because be honest with you, I'm not a huge mixed martial arts fan of the fans. And what I mean by that is I can remember, I fought in UFC 58 when Rich Franklin fought George St. Pierre. And I can remember when I got done, my fight, it was early on the card. I went out into the stands and I put a baseball cap on and I just sat there and really was largely disappointed in the fan base at the Mandalay Bay in Las Vegas because people, in the West here, we want to see two guys chained to the ankle and bludgeon each other to death. In the East, there's a giant appreciation just for the skill level. It's very disappointing to me that you can get a man or a woman that spent 10 years, 20 years of their life preparing for 2 or 3 competitions a year, and they're going to be in that cage for 15 minutes. And people in the audience are like, oh, you suck. Oh, kill him.
Yeah.
It's a little disappointing, I'll be honest with you. And I feel like it's almost getting worse because you've got to have the big, brutish persona where you hate the other guy because that's the addiction that we have to entertainment. So, I could talk tons about it. But for me, it's a hook to kids. It's to confuse them, and then it's to lay out this message.
Masters, we are going to get you right back to the show. June 11th, special opportunity, a webinar. Listen, June 11th, 3 to 4 p.m. Eastern Time, 1-hour webinar with me. Going to be talking about prospecting, for sale by owners, expireds, all the different types of car reluctance. $19, guys. You can't beat that. Special opportunity I'm putting together with the Hergenrother Training Organization. If you're interested in that, you want to take listings, you want to crush your prospecting, or if you're just having some challenges with getting on those phones every day, this is a perfect opportunity for you. For $19, go to listnow.us. listnow.us. Check that out. And then after that, you need some data, contact our sponsors, vulcan7.com/path to mastery. Take advantage of 2 weeks of everything they have, all their data for $49. Just some amazing opportunities for you going into the spring market. Listen, you love podcasts, you're going to love Audible. Audible is the number one source of audiobooks. You can get yourself a free copy of whatever book you choose. I would personally recommend, you know what I just listened to that was phenomenal? It was actually Andre Agassi's book called Open. If you're like me, a grinder, you're going to absolutely love that book. Anyway, get any book you want. Just go to davidsfreebook.com. Get yourself a free Audible book on us. All right? Hey, you rock. Enjoy the rest of the show. And please give us a review. It super helps. I definitely want to switch gears and talk about the kids and the bullying and the sweethearts and heroes. It's funny because what you said about Mike Tyson, I also watched a lot of Tyson, and he was one of my idols growing up. And one of the things he said in one of his interviews was that he was filled with so much fear before the fight that he just went out there viciously because he was terrified. Not that he wanted to hurt people, but that he was scared, and it's interesting because when I think about my childhood, I can relate to that. Yeah. Like that was how I approached it. Not like you approached it. Like, okay, I'm going to go have fun. I love doing this. I love wrestling. It was like, no, my father used to make me go out and fight the biggest kid on the street because maybe he said something to me. You know what I mean? Yeah. So it's just a different perspective, but I don't want to spend all the time talking about this. We can do that another time, but Let's transition. So you go into the schools, you have a program that you talk to the kids about bullying as well as leadership, correct?
Oh, man, we do so many things, but let me put it in a neat little nutshell for you. My partner, Jason, has lost 5 kids in his 20 years of teaching, and you say lost them to suicide, to their own hands. And people call us the bullying guys. Nothing could truly be further from the truth. I'm not in this game to fight bullying, and that sounds kind of weird because we've already discussed this thing called bullying. I'm truly not in the game for that. We talk about this common thread of sweethearts, people that give hope to other people. As Jason looked back over the kids that he's lost to their own hands over the last 20 years, he'd say they all shared a common thread as well. And, was that common thread bullying? I'll tell you, maybe in 1 or 2 of them, it could have been. But the reality is every single one of those kids felt hopeless. They felt like they couldn't hold on. They felt like there were no possibilities that existed for their future, so they gave up. And really, the contagion is this thing called hopelessness. And we have a generation of young people, David, and pay very close attention. I always tell adults, pay very close attention because we're not talking about it. The number one thing to take the life of a 10 to 14-year-old in North America today are their own hands. For the last 50 years, it's been like car accidents. But last year, that number was just overtaken, and now it teeters back and forth. Suicide is the number one thing really to take the life of a middle school kid in North America. And in the high school, it's like 70 or 80% it's up. It's Wow. Absolutely astonishing. And people say, is it bullying? I don't know. But I can tell you one thing, it's hopelessness. Because hopeless people do crazy things. Our other partner, Rick Yarish, 70% of his body was burned away in Iraq. He'll tell you it's crazy to think that there's kids walking through our hallways that feel as hopeless as he did when he laid on the ground in Iraq burning to death and decided to die. Like he just gave up. And we have kids. The acronym that we use, one of our bully buttons, is this thing called HOPE, which stands for Hold On, Possibilities Exist. And David, if you look back into your past, if you flirted with hopelessness, you had really bad thoughts that ran through your head. Every human does, I think. But what reason did you have to hold on? What possibilities existed for your future?
So here's an interesting thing, and this is something that I learned just, probably in the last 8 or 10 years, was that because of those things that my father made me do as a kid and beat me and made me fight, and he made me tough. That was the only area in my life that I ever got confidence from. So although it got me in trouble, if it wasn't for that, I don't know where, because I had no confidence any other areas of my life except that I was good with my hands and I knew how to fight. A shy kid with no skills for communication or letting people know how I feel or anything. And my only skill is an ability to fight, learning kickboxing at a young age. It's not a good combination.
Well, it's funny, I had this conversation with so many dads. Putting me in front of over 1 million kids in the last 10 years has put me in front of a tremendous amount of educators and probably just as many parents over the years. And one of the discussions I have with parents all the time, and they say, yeah, well, I think you got to make a kid tough, and some of these lessons they got to learn in the school of hard knocks. And I always look at the dads, and I figured this out a couple of years ago, and I just look at them and I say, what other animal do we train that way? Like if you have a dog and you want to train a dog, do you beat it? Do you kick it? Do you smack it? Do you holler at it? That doesn't make a lot of sense. I don't think we can find another animal that we train if you don't want it to become a monster. If you want it to become a monster, sure, kick it and train it that way. But really, the only thing that we logically conclude, like some people say, that's how you got to make a kid tough. I would reach back into your past, David, and I'd say you had this contradiction going on because, yeah, maybe that cycle started with your father, but then you got into kickboxing. And I'm going to bet some money on this, that you had a couple men jump into your life in those gyms and those places and gave you some meaning and gave you some hope and gave you some purpose and gave you some human connection that gave you more of a positive look on what was happening, even though you were introduced in such a malicious way on its onset. I mean, I could be wrong, but
I would say, honestly, that came later in life, Tom. I feel like as a younger adult, I didn't have a lot of good influencers, so I connected with, a gang of young guys my age that liked to kickbox. So what do? We went out and got in fights after roller skating and stupid crap like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I was lucky, and as I got older, I did start to get around influential people and people that were doing better things with their lives. And I'm fortunate,
Yeah.
I don't condone at all. I think for me, I have to look at my childhood and say, okay, this is what I went through. Nobody should ever go through that. My daughters, I have 3 amazing daughters who will never see anything like that. But that's how I found my strength. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does make strength. And, I think there's certainly extremes on every side of the pole, and there's certain things in my life educationally. I have the worst grades out of any kid I've ever met, and I defied those odds. I'm telling you, man, I had a 630 combined score on my SATs, but 4 years later, as my brain continued to grow and develop, and as I developed strategies, and I realized I could use strategies from sports on academics. No one had ever taught me that until Dr. Ireland taught me that. But I had defied those odds. Just getting back to what we were talking about, I think that I know that on the other end of that extreme, our prison systems are filled with men that did not end up on that very extreme end that you ended up on. And I would still bet that if we went backwards, the anger and the hatred and the frustration, at some point, a switch was turned by someone in your life.
My grandparents. I was with my grandparents, so thinking about that, that's probably accurate.
Yeah.
So talk to us about, how does this work? So I know when you were up at the event with us, you had kind of shared some of the strategies you use with these kids. So it's not like you just come in and talk to the kids and say, hey, tell us about how this actually works. Why does it work?
The greatest amount of our success is we are not a group that comes in and talks about awareness of bullying and those kinds of things. As I told you, we center a lot of what we do around the hopelessness that kids feel today. For me and for our organization, I know that the solution to a kid that's hopeless is you flood their lives with sweethearts, 16th century bullies that give hope to kids that need it the most. And you surround them with heroes, people that are willing to jump into action and do things other people aren't willing to do. There's 2 really giant concepts there, and we take the next 2 hours talking about them. Our group is a bystander empowerment group. If you take what Einstein said this world is a dangerous place to live, not because of evil people, but because of those who choose to do nothing about it. I'll be quite frank with you, David. I'm not in schools for kids that get bullied or kids that are bullies. I'm there for the rest of them. We know that 85% of all that negative behavior is actually done or seen by other students. I mean, you can, if you go back into your past, David, you can still remember the name of the kid in your school, multiple kids that weren't treated the right way. Like, you can still see their faces. You can still remember their first names. I've met very few people in my life that can't still remember those kids. Well, those kids exist today. And one of the greatest issues that we really truly face with our youth today is empathy. The ability to feel another person's feelings has plummeted almost in half. Our kids are 40 to 50% less empathetic than kids 30 years ago. So that person you were just thinking about that wasn't treated the right way back when you were a kid, that kid almost has no chance today to receive hope from kids and to have kids jump into action and help them through situations, through tough things. And that's truly all a kid really craves. I mean, you and I are just pack animals, David, and our craving is to be accepted. That's just what it means to be human. And we have kids that aren't getting those needs met. And our job, and we've developed something, and I'll wrap this up in this thing called empathetic fitness. Empathy is like a muscle. We know this. If you look at the biology and you look at the neurology of it, you can strengthen those components of the brain if you practice. But it's like anything, man. The more you practice, the better you get at it. And I know that what's happening with social media, what's happening online, what's happening with the reduction in personal connection that kids are having, they just aren't practicing being in front of other kids, watching, letting their little subconscious minds soak up how other people are feeling and developing properly. And therefore, empathy is crashing. We go in with a very specific goal of not just telling kids and instructing kids about what's happening, but a very specific plan when it comes to what they can do and how schools and how parents and how humans can rebuild this thing called empathy. So there's a lot to it, man, but we know it works. I mean, I could parade a string of parents in front of you that would physically, and I hate to use this analogy, that would physically fight you if you said that this message didn't save their kid's life. It's been 10 years, and the anecdotal proof is there because I've had parent after parent go to myself or to my partner, Jason, and say, this message probably saved my son or daughter's life.
What I love, too, is you, even for us, when you did the presentation on leadership, which was phenomenal, by the way, and I don't know if you know this or not, but you were the only person that actually got a standing ovation from the crowd that was there. So that was phenomenal. But you also shared how you don't just go in and talk to the kids, like you already said that, but you actually role model it for them. Like, if you're in a situation, this is how you handle it.
So if I were to ask you, David, what do you do when you catch on fire? You will immediately say,
roll, stop, drop, roll.
Right. We've taught 50 million kids what to do when they potentially catch on fire. That's the number of public school students in this country every year. I could turn to you or anyone and say, have you ever met a single human that's ever used that skill? And most people will chuckle when they think about it, and they'll say, well, no, I really haven't. And then I always say, so we've taught 50 million kids what to do when they never catch on fire. And my claim, my supposition is that we have kids around this country that are on fire a different way, socially, psychologically, emotionally. When I go to any kid in North America and I say to them, what do you do when you see someone not being treated the right way, maybe on fire a different way, what do you do? And most kids look at you and they say, tell a teacher, which it's not part of common pack law to do that. Like, you break pack code when you do that. Like snitches, get stitches. The reality is most of our kids don't know what to do when kids aren't being treated the right way. One of our little things that we do is we say we have to stop, drop, and roll with bullying. Now, stop, drop, and roll works because it's simple, it's action-based, and it's life-saving. And those are the three components that make it effective. We have developed a plan based on what you just said on modeling behavior, because that's how mammals learn. They watch other mammals a couple years older than themselves, and they replicate the behavior. And so we have developed what we call a bully drill, like a fire drill. You take kids through fire drills, but there hasn't been a fire in a school since like the 1950s, like a real fire. I'm not talking about the Bunsen burner falling over, but like a real raging fire in North America in a school. But we still do fire drills, and we'll probably never use them for real. What we do is we condition kids. We take them through these drills that are self-designed by them. Most of our work is based on very solid play science, like a lot of Stuart Brown's work and a couple other great scientists that know that everything that you needed, David, to transition successfully from childhood into adulthood, you learned in one place and one place only, in self-directed, self-controlled play. That's how mammals learn. And play since the 1950s like been cut in half when it comes to self-directed and self-controlled play. So we allow kids, young people, that have already gone through trials and tribulations, and if you think of a few issues or scenarios when you were a kid, we actually have them build like a bully drill, like a fire drill, and they take younger kids through those experiences dozens and dozens of times, so that when a kid leaves elementary school, gets into the middle school, high school, they will have practiced certain things hundreds of times. So there won't be the first time someone called someone gay in a socially charged situation. They'll have heard it dozens of times, and they'll have actually practiced the skills, which have to be very, very simple. And I'll give you the first one. Like we always say, it's as simple as the ABCs. I say it's the starter pack of superpowers. And I always ask kids, I say, you know where I got it from? And they just like blankly stare at me. And I say, well, duh, I got it at superhero school. Mm-hmm. And if you think of it, David, there's certain things, that's characteristics that real superheroes have. Like when someone's in danger, what's the first thing a superhero does? He or she flies in and takes the person.
Takes them out.
Takes them away. Like A, that's the A of our ABCs. Now imagine if you were a kid, I'm talking about an elementary school kid, and we had two older kids walk up to another kid and start teasing or making fun, and you practiced looking silly or ridiculous, making yourself vulnerable, going over to this kid that's getting picked on and saying, hey man, can you show me where the pencils are at? Hey man, can you show me where the principal's office is? And you just take the person away. Now, we would practice those skills over and over and over again, and we would put a plan in place with the school for them to keep these going day after day, week after week, year after year. Now, just think about it like this. Imagine telling a kid how to do a math problem one time. Now, I said telling a kid how to do a math problem one time, and then clapping them on the shoulder and saying, hey, good luck, man, I'll see you at the state test. Now, that sounds kind of silly, but when you look at your own daughter and you clap her on the shoulder when she's entering middle school and you say, hey, sweetie, stick up for that kid that's different, and you slap her on the shoulder and say good luck with that, you're essentially doing the same exact thing. And now you're asking her to even do something that's almost impossible because she's craving this connection with a pack, with friends, and now you want her to go out and to help someone that smells. That's a really tough thing for a kid that's never practiced that one time. I would say it's an impossible thing for a kid. That's kind of part of the heart of what we do. Our empathetic fitness package certainly goes much deeper than that, but a lot of what we do centers around that bully drill, centers around play science, a lot of John Medina's work on the brain and the brain science, how the brain actually learns. And that's what we spend most of our time doing, is going into school, giving a very passionate message, but teaching kids how to become sweethearts, the carriers of hope, and heroes, people that take action.
I love it, man. Well, I want to help you guys with this and get you connected to some of the schools in the central Massachusetts area. I used to actually go and talk to a lot of the kids at the summer school programs and other programs just because of my childhood. So I could relate to some of those kids, or they could relate to me, I should say. How do our listeners, Tom, find out more about you if they want to learn more about this?
Well, I always tell kids this magic place called the internet. So all someone need to do is Google Sweethearts and Heroes. You'll find us on YouTube and Facebook and Snapchat and Instagram. But just go to our website. You can send me a note. I respond to every single note we get. Doesn't matter how trivial it is. If somebody's looking for some hope and they're reaching out for us, and we do from K through 12, we do a lot of collegiate stuff, as you got to experience. do some other stuff. And all of our core principles revolve around this message, whether it's leadership, whether it's motivation, whether it's goal setting. They really revolve around all of these key principles of giving hope to other people and taking action in everything that we do. Even on the business side, we spend a lot of time in front of corporations too.
We got a lot of highly successful people listening to this. I would encourage them to go check you guys out on YouTube. You've got some great videos on YouTube. How do we help you? Like, what's the best approach if someone says, you know what, I need to get this into my son or my daughter's school? What's the approach for that?
It's like anything. It's like the marketing world. There's so much bombardment. And I walked away from a very career. If I told you the career that I had and the lifestyle that I had and what I left behind, you'd probably call me crazy. But there's nothing more important on earth, my friend. If I were to ask you what the most important thing in your life is, you wouldn't hesitate. You'd say one of three things. You'd say your wife, you'd say your children, or your belief system. That's what you'd tell me. When you rattle down that list, when you get to about number 5, you'll get to your career. And unfortunately, we as humans put way too much time and training into our professional career, and we put almost zero time and training into the things that are the most important. We need to pay attention to what's happening in the world today. It's happening under our noses. We're losing our children at an unprecedented rate. But this market is flooded with people that have stories and are raising awareness, which is very important. But I can call 1,000 schools and maybe 2 will call me back. That's the truth. And they'll say, yeah, we got these kind of programs all the time. And I'll say, no, you don't have these kind of programs all the time. And, I finally left my career about 5 years into this to do this full time because I had more teachers than I could count that say, we've never seen anything like this message in 20, 30 years of education. I got a note last week from a teacher that posted on Twitter. He said, 16 years, the greatest day of education I've had in 16 years. And I can't count the number of those. So I guess my point is, how can you help? If you pick up the phone and call the school, if you pick up the phone and call someone on the school board and said, listen, you got to check these guys out. And I promise you, no one has ever seen anything like what we do. I mean, what you saw on the leadership side, David, was child's play compared to what we really do when it comes to this Sweethearts and Heroes message and changing and saving lives. I can promise you. And I know that sounds awful arrogant, man. I'm on my way to a school right now in Western New York. We've been there for 7 years in a row because it's had such an impact. And this is a school with 300 kids per grade level. I just know the impact it has, man, and no one has had this impact. And it's not me, it's this message.
All right, man. Well, clearly, I'm sure everybody listening to this is going to get that passion. And anything I should have asked you that I did not?
No, man, I just tell everybody, don't lose sight of the fact that you're all going to be on the big stage someday. We're all going to be in our coffins, and it's inevitable, so we can talk about it. And just don't ever forget that the only people that are going to file by that casket are going to be the people whose life you've impacted in a positive way. And not a single person is going to talk about the house you had or the car you had. They're going to talk about what you did to positively affect their lives and the lives of other people. And I'm not trying to get metaphysical or spiritual on anybody, but even just at a secular level, you've got to think about that because nothing else matters. If we're not thinking about the most important thing, our children, what's the point? So again, I don't mean to get too spiritual or metaphysical. Something's got to change, man, because, I always tell teachers, I said, behavior is a form of communication. And this generation is communicating with us with their own hands, and no one's talking about it. It's a blip on the screen, and then we say, oh, that's a shame, and then we wait for the next one. But we can't do it without people, man, and people sounding the alarm.
Fantastic, my friend. Well, listen, I just want to say I appreciate your time. I encourage everybody listening to this to check out your YouTube videos, reach out to you. I know I'm going to make it a point, my friend. I'm going to commit to getting you guys connected with some local schools, and I want to be part of this as well, man. So thank you.
Thank you, man. If you need anything, don't be afraid to call. I work 24/7. That's what superheroes do. So I tell people, you got to call me at 3 a.m.
Love it. Masters, if you know me, you know health and nutrition is number one, and that's why I'm an advisor for AdvoCare products. Listen, in my opinion, these are the best products on the planet, guys. You get what you're supposed to get, right? I use the products for health. I use the products for energy. I use the products for wellness. So we have all the different lines from Spark, starting your day with a great energy shot, all the way to pre-workout. It's whatever your goals are, right? It's whatever your goals are. You can check out the products at www.livelongersmarter.com. That's my website. Or reach out to me. I'd love to have a 30-minute or, anywhere from 15 to 30-minute conversation with you, just talking about your health and nutrition goals and what I can do to help you achieve those goals. So again, products, energy line, or wellness line, whether it's joints, you're getting up there in the age, you just want to take care of yourself. I'll tell you, one of the greatest compliments I get is people, you say, wow, you look amazing. I cannot believe you are the age you are. Weight loss. I've helped lots of people, guys, lose weight, not just lose it, but keep it off with the products. And the cool thing is, I'd say 75% of the people who start with our products, they continue using our products even after they initially tried them, which has been amazing. And strength, if you're into bodybuilding, then hey, Rich Fronin, okay? I don't know if you know who Rich Fronin is. He's an advocate for AdvoCare as well. So amazing products. You can see us. We're featured on NASCAR, professional soccer, college basketball, college football, Men's Health magazine last month. These are the real deal, guys. LiveLongerSmarter.com is the website, or reach out to me if you, like I said, if you want to have a personal conversation with me, just send me an email. In the subject line, just put AdvoCare products, and I'd love, like I said, schedule a 15 to 30-minute call with you to talk about your health and nutrition goals. Guys, you rock. Live longer, smarter. And as Gary Keller eloquently said, if you don't take care of your body, where are you gonna live? You rock.
You are listening to One More Sale with your host, David I. Hill, author of the Sales Playbook. Get your copy at www.thesalesplaybook.net.